This week's Farm Basics is brought to you by satshot.com. Satellites aren't just for NASA anymore. Use the power of satellite imagery to create variable rate management zones in your fields. To reduce input costs and increase yields on your farm, go to satshot.com.
During our Farm Basics time today, we wanted to talk a little bit about manure since Darren's standing in it.
Well, I'm not really like waist deep in it or anything, but we did spread some manure on this field this fall, and I thought it was kind of neat because you walk out to the field, you really don't smell manure. I mean, you can kind of just, if you really tried to, if you got down on your knees and sniffed around on the ground, you probably could smell some, but
that's really a lovely picture you just painted for me there, Darren. But anyway,
well, what I'm trying to get at is the manure got injected down into the soil. So there's a layer of 8 inches of dirt right above where that manure is. So it's holding that smell and holding all those nutrients down in the soil where they belong.
Yeah, well, the reason why I pulled out a sheet here is what we wanted to talk about during our Farm Basics topic is the fact that we sample the manure that we're applying on our farm, and we encourage all farmers to sample, and we wanted to run through what some of the nutrient content was in that manure.
Okay, hold on now. Let's talk about that sampling real quick, because the thing with manure, it's great fertilizer, but it's not as consistent as if you were buying commercial dry fertilizer. So if you're buying MAP, for example, it's going to be 11-52-0 or some ratio real close to that. And when you're bringing that out to your field, you can be pretty confident, you know, the first semi-load you bring out and the second semi-load you bring out, you're going to put on the same amount of nutrients. When you're hauling manure out to a field and you're stirring up a big lagoon or a big pit, it's not going to be very consistent all the way through.
No, it's not, but if it's liquid manure and it does get stirred properly, it's fairly close. So most of our samples over the years have been just about dead on to this. They've been within 10% one way or the other, so it's been pretty good. But to Darren's point, especially when people are spreading dry manure, you can see big differences there. So this is one of the things we encourage farmers to do, not only to test their manure, but to continue testing it as time goes on, just to make sure that they know exactly what they're putting out there. So, for example, we've got this whole test that we ran on manure that we applied on this ground right here where we stand. And we've got nitrogen in there, we have phosphorus, potassium, sulfur, calcium, magnesium, copper, iron, manganese, zinc, all good stuff for the plant. The only problem that we have is sodium. When you get too much sodium, too many salts, then that does start to be an issue. So there's a limit to how much manure we want to put out. In other words, we could have put lots of manure out here, all kinds of manure, but if you get too much manure, then you have too much salt, and that actually hurts crop growth. So what we do on our farm is we put some manure out and then we supplement that with commercial fertilizer that's lower in salt.
Well, let's just say you had 50 pounds of salt per 1,000 gallons of liquid manure. If you're going to put 5,000 gallons out, that's 250 pounds of salts per acre that you're putting out. Well, that's not so bad. That's okay for most crops you're going to raise. But let's say that you put out 10,000 gallons of manure. You made some kind of mistake, and all of a sudden you got twice as much volume out there as you wanted. Now you have 500 pounds of salt per acre. This is where you start running into some trouble, especially with certain crops.
Yeah, with certain crops and in drier conditions and lighter soils. So when you have a heavier soil and more rainfall, you can have a little more salt. All right, but anyway, let's get specific here for exactly what we put out in terms of nutrients onto this field right here. So there are a couple different things when you're looking at manure. There's what's available the first year and what's available after that, because manure isn't all available. It doesn't all break down. It's not all ready to go for this coming year's crop. Some of it comes available over a period of years. So we always like to look at, most importantly, what's available for this year's crop. So in this particular sample, we had 19 pounds of nitrogen per 1,000 gallons that we put out. We applied 6,000 gallons out here. So roughly we've got about 114 pounds of actual nitrogen. And for our corn crop that we wanted out here, let's say we needed 250 pounds of actual nitrogen. We've already got 114. So then we're going to apply some additional nitrogen beyond that.
Well, that's a good point, because a lot of times you think, well, I put manure on, I'm covered. I put lots of fertilizer out there. Man, I put 6,000 gallons of the stuff out there. I should be covered, but that's why you need to run these analyses just to see. Like Brian said, we're only halfway there on nitrogen, so we definitely are going to have to supplement there.
So potassium, we know we're going to get enough potassium out. 21 pounds is available the first year per 1,000 gallons. We put 6,000 gallons out. We've got over 120 pounds of available potassium. That's way more than what our corn crop is going to need for the coming year. But phosphorus, here's where we have a little bit of an issue. With phosphorus, we're only getting 7 pounds of phosphorus out per 1,000 gallons. Okay, if we have 6,000 100,000 gallons, we're getting 42 pounds of phosphate out here. Well, a corn crop removes about 76 pounds of phosphate just with the grain only, not even counting the stover. So in other words, we put all this manure out. A lot of people say, well, that's good enough. That's my whole fertility program. What we're saying is we've got to supplement that with nitrogen and supplement that with phosphorus.
Well, the problem when we're talking about liquid manure is there's so much water in it. Yeah, we put 6,000 gallons out here, but it's over 90% water. So for the most part, we're putting 500 or 600 pounds of solids. A lot of them are nutrients, but other things too, out in the field. So we really aren't putting out as much as it seems like we're putting out.
Well, once again, we do believe it's very important that farmers try to inject their manure deep. The reason why, we have less smell, less problem for the neighbors, and we hold the nutrients down in the soil where we want them. And then we also think it's really important that farmers test their manure so they know what they're putting out there, and then they compare that versus what the crop will actually use and what their field really needs, so then they can supplement the manure with commercial fertilizer in order to raise a great crop this coming year.
Well, you're going to need even more fertilizer if you let this weed of the week get away in your field. Can you identify it?